Welcome to On the Bench. I'm Zach Blostein, joined here by my buddies Brendan Sonnone and Chris Nee. It's Clemson week, fellas. We did the podcast earlier in the week, but we're getting closer to game time. It's time to reconvene and talk about some things. First off, let's pay some bills. Brendan, who is On the Bench brought to you by?
Starting off, Chattanooga Whiskey, one of my favorite distilleries out there, by far my favorite craft distillery. They do an amazing job with pretty much everything that they attempt to do. Bourbon, cask strength bourbon, rye, experimental, finishing, all sorts of cool stuff. Chris, I'm bringing a single barrel bottle of their 111 up to Atlanta, North Georgia, for our Clemson trip. So we'll partake in that this weekend, maybe. So yeah, Chattanooga Whiskey, do an amazing job. You can find them all throughout the Southeast. Sealbacks.com if you're trying to get an order somewhere else remotely. They do exquisite work, and we're very lucky to have them as a sponsor.
This podcast is also brought to you by Football Coach College Dynasty. It's the ultimate college football management game for PC, available on Steam. I'm having a ton of fun with this game. We've talked about at length about this game. I think I'm 10 seasons in now with Georgia State finally getting some momentum building on.
I thought it was Tulane.
That was my last save. Now I started Georgia State, but now I'm on the hardest difficulty, which actually makes it really tough because the other schools get higher NIL boosts with recruits and transfer portal guys. So it's been a lot tougher, but it's super rewarding once you get kind of like past the tough times and turn around the program, and that's where I feel like I am right now. So definitely check out Football Coach College Dynasty on Steam. 95% positive rating on there. It's only $11.99.
Can't beat that. Chris, we're only a minute and a half in, and Zach's already off the script that I spent time working on, so that's good.
I'm totally not.
You got to put the teleprompter in front of him.
I'm reading the teleprompter.
Okay, sure.
All right, segment 1.
Oh, you are. That's my fault.
Yeah, there you go. Good job. Let's get into this week of practice, guys. I want to talk first with Brendan just about the early portions of this week, because obviously they're coming off that kind of surprising game versus Boston College a week ago. And a lot of things showed up in that game that weren't great. Brendan, how do you think the response was on Tuesday, the first practice we were able to view this week?
The parts about the BC game that were concerning were the start and then the response after you kind of had settled in and built that 21-point lead. But no need to relive that any further. We're flushing BC. Really wanted to see how the team would respond. I think we talked about that on the Monday podcast, that we were very interested to see what FSU looked like at our first glance during that Tuesday practice, and be totally transparent. And Chris can attest to this, how I was, how it impacted me. But I thought the Tuesday practice was one of the more disappointing practices that I've covered here in the last year and a half or so. Just from the energy was fine. Like, it wasn't like guys were coming out, not, bad body language, not trying. It's just like, it wasn't crisp. The execution wasn't what you would hope it would be in response to that wake-up call that we talked about potentially having against Boston College, especially on offense. Like, I thought the offense just was not, during one-on-ones, the skill players weren't winning a ton. During like install scout team stuff, we won't get into specifics there, but like it wasn't crisp. There was multiple times where just like the plays didn't look like they wanted them to. You could sense some frustration. I thought that way at the end of practice. Like, this just did not seem like a very clean practice for the offense. I would normally say like maybe it was just the defense playing really well, but when the scout team defense is disrupting you more often than you'd like, I think that's more indicative of one side of the ball. And then even Coach Norvell's post-practice interview, he's not normally abrupt or curt. He's usually very he's really good with his time. He's very generous with his time after practices. And I thought for him, it was just a little out of character that he didn't seem to be super loving all the questions. And also there weren't a ton of questions to give to him either, to be fair, but he didn't seem like he was happy with the practice, if I had to put on my body language reading type of glasses there. So anyways, it was not a really crisp practice. Tuesday didn't feel inherently good to me. It set up an interesting Wednesday practice, I guess, to kind of see how they would respond.
Yeah, I thought energy was fine on Tuesday in the sense of like they came out and they did go to work. I just thought it was kind of a lack of coordination from an offensive standpoint. It never got in a rhythm. There was never a point where you're like, man, it's humming or it's going like it should be. And it wasn't so much defense being disruptive. The defense was good, but it wasn't like the defense had a just ultra dominant day where they did not allow the offense to get off the ground. There were instances, for example, against Scout Team where the offense just held the ball or took a sack, and that just shouldn't be happening. It's not something that's usual in those portions of the practices. But they responded. I won't steal the thunder of your next question, but I felt like they responded pretty well Wednesday.
Yeah, I guess, Brendan, after watching I don't know if you want to call it a disappointment of a practice on Tuesday, how do you feel like, did things change on Wednesday? Did the offense specifically function better?
Yeah, at the risk of over analyzing this topic here, I thought that Tuesday was indeed disappointing. I was disappointed by it, and I thought the response on Wednesday was awesome. It was really good, especially for the offense, Zach. Like Jordan wasn't bad on Tuesday. It just like the whole thing itself, like just didn't seem like it was clicking. That was the exact opposite on Wednesday. It was one of the more crisp, efficient, well-run offensive practices that we've seen. Like the one-on-one stuff, Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson doing what they're supposed to do, and that's kind of your starting point. But Jordan was very sharp. You saw other guys getting involved. Destin Hill had a couple of really nice catches, and that's just like one component of it. But even like little things like during an install portion of the week or early in the week, like there was a time where Coach Norvell was not really happy with the track that Trey Benson took, got on him for it. Later on, they ran a very similar concept, and the track was extraordinary, and it led to an explosive play. And that was in like a good-on-good type of setting, too. And then just the scout teamwork. I think Chris was watching the offense at one point and just texted, like, and I got to see it later on. He said crispy, and I was like, what does that mean? I think it was just a typo, but it was crisp is what Chris meant. And I was like, crispy in a bad way? Like, are they charred? Like, what's happening? Because I was watching the defensive side of the ball. So, yeah, it was remarkably better. When Mike Norvell goes like this, people watching on video, if we post it on YouTube with the politician thumbs up after play, it means that that's installed correctly. That's good. We like it. And he was doing that a lot on Wednesday. He wasn't doing a lot on Tuesday. So feel much better. It felt right. That's probably the best way I can describe it. Crispy.
Yeah, there was a general sense of urgency, and that was true for both days. And it came across, especially from the coaches, but also some ways from the players and from leadership of the players. But I thought Wednesday had both the sense of urgency and it looked like it should look. It went good tempo, good rhythm. They really got into a rhythm, especially against Scout Team, which is what you want to see. You want to see stack plays, go, reps, high rep count, keep going. Norvell is always moving that hand in the background of like, yeah, next rep up, next rep up. They always want to be going at a high rate. And that didn't feel like it ever happened on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, it certainly happened. It was pretty enjoyable to watch when it did happen. And it just seemed like in general, like everybody was kind of on the same page, rowing the same way. In practices, prior to BC, they practiced well. So like the BC performance was surprising based off of a practice standpoint. But we've seen bad practices, not many of them, but a handful here and there leading up to games. And then the game doesn't reflect that. The game, they perform better, they play better. So it doesn't always translate where bad practice turns into a bad game or great practice turns into a great game. Now, sometimes it does, but it does not always. Coming off this week of practices, I feel perfectly fine about how they've prepped for Clemson, where they are from a mental standpoint, where they are from a sense of understanding that it's a pretty significant game. It's a conference game. It's a road game. It's against an opponent that has beaten this program 7 straight times. So, I think all of that was conveyed through the actions of how they handled practice and went about it. And the last thing I'll add is Mike Norvell has been all about the business this week. He was very short on Tuesday. Some of that was, I think, because of a product of the practice. But I think in general, the focus is just very simple. Like, you can ask him about how loud Clemson Stadium is and things like that. He doesn't care. This is about FSU going out and proving they're a really good football team and beating a really good football team. And that's all he gives a what about.
Yeah, I was listening to the Jordan Travis interview on Wednesday, and I think we need to have like a bingo card every time he speaks, because it seems like he's always saying it's about us, not about the opponent. He's going to find a way to throw that line in there. But speaking of Clemson, let's get into a little bit.
Real quick, he is right. Like if FSU handles its business, there's not a whole lot of teams that are
But
going
that's
to
been
match.
the mantra.
BC didn't play FSU well. FSU played BC poorly in stretches, and that's why that scoreboard looked like it did. FSU gave them a touchdown, and they set them up for another, and that's why the scoreboard looked like. If FSU played, so it's 31-10. If FSU plays like FSU can play, it's a blowout. They didn't.
Yes, but also Thomas Castellano played his butt off too. Like
but BC didn't. BC's not very good.
No, they're not. They're correct.
They're not. Go to my deathbed believing that.
We flushed BC. We flushed it.
All right, on to Clemson.
Yeah,
we're on to Clemson.
Opponent preview. There won't be a Noel thy enemy this week as a member of the Draper family is giving birth. So congratulations.
Probably more information.
I didn't.
The good news is it's not Dane.
Family member. I'm just saying that's why Dane is not giving birth, guys.
Oh my God. Dane, I had nothing to do with this other than just explain on the back end why we weren't going to know.
Give a nice congratulations.
Congratulations to the Draper family.
Go be a great uncle, Dane. You've got high level. You have high level uncle material to you.
Idiots.
All right. So I want Weatherman Sonone to get in here first.
Oh God, I'm so tired of weather.
There was another storm heading up that way, right towards the Carolinas.
Look at my weather notes.
Is this going to be an equally beautiful day to that Boston College game where we were worried about all dying from Hurricane Lee?
Yeah, that wasn't a beautiful game or day. That was dreary and just.
It was very clear and nice once the game kicked off, buddy. Nobody cares about what it was like at 10 a.m. Yes, it was.
It was not clear and nice. That's bullcrap. Yeah. That's not true at all.
Massachusetts? Hell yes.
I didn't know we were grading on the New England.
They would take that day 90 times in the winter.
Clemson is going to be, knock on wood, pretty fine weather-wise. There is a storm. I think it's like a tropical depression or something right now. Maybe I don't think it's a tropical storm, but there's something brewing. It is going up the Atlantic coast, but it's stayed east. It hasn't moved in and tucked in as much as they thought it would. So basically, it's going to impact a lot of portions of North Carolina, Virginia. It doesn't seem like southwestern South Carolina is going to be an issue. So the drive into Clemson, South Carolina, will probably be a bit of a you-know-what show, given that it's at noon and there might be some rain and it'll probably be a little windy, but it's not going to be awful. But going into the one-horse town that is Clemson will probably be a little problematic for us, but that's not here nor there. Weather should be fine. It won't impact the game as much as this past weekend because it wasn't clear. It was definitely windy and rained on and off at times before the game.
But it was quite nice actually during the football game.
It was nice after the game. I'm not going to. It was not nice during. If you saw the punts get taken a few times or a couple of Jordan's passes get sailing past it, what are we talking? Go ahead, Zach.
I've been in Massachusetts at a football game when it's raining sideways. Come on right, now,
Chris. Let's reel you in here. What does Clemson's offense look like this year?
Well, it's weird. I watched the Duke game in real time, and it looked pretty bad, to be perfectly honest. Will Shipley is always going to be the dude, and Will Shipley's a really good football player. Very well established what Will Shipley can do to Florida State. Phil Moffitt's become more of a piece of the pie for them. He's their second running back, a little bit more power, 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of running style compared to Shipley's versatility. Their passing game against Duke wasn't very good. A lot of stuff out to the flats, a lot of quick throws. It just did not feel like they were capable of getting vertical, of getting explosive. Now, the offense has looked better the last 2 weeks. They've played Charleston Southern and then FAU, Florida Atlantic, over the last 2 weeks. So is it a product of the new offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, and this offense kind of getting on the same page and getting a little more comfortable, and Cade Klubnik feeling comfortable as a quarterback in that offense of doing what he can do? And they still obviously have talented players, skill on the outside, maybe not to the level we're used to at Clemson in the last decade, but it's still capable guys. A guy like Antonio Williams, for example, is a talented receiver on the outside for them. Bo Collins is another one. Tyler Brown's kind of stepped up and become a guy. And then Jake Brittingstool is a tight end for them who they like to use and is talented. All those guys are capable. But I don't know if what I've watching the last two games versus the Duke game is because of the opponents or because the offense is finding its footing. If FSU wants to win, they need to slow down Shipley. I don't think they're going to – or Shipley. They're not going to stop him. I don't think Shipley's the kind of guy you stop. Too many things he can do. We're going to get him an opportunity to do something, whether it's running between the tackles, running off tackle, throwing it to him, getting him on a mismatch down the field. I think for FSU, it's more about take away the other pieces. Kind of like when you play a really good basketball team and they got a guy who's going to get 30, let him get his 30, but don't let the other guys get 10, 15, 20 and, do it against you. To me, that's what FSU's defense needs to do. And obviously, bothering the quarterback would be a valuable asset as well. And as always is the case, win the turnover battle. But Clemson's offense to me is not a juggernaut, but I also don't think it's as bad as what I watched in the Duke game. I think it's somewhere in between those two.
To me, we've seen what Will Shipley has done to Florida State's defense the past 2 games in this rivalry matchup. To me, it's about limiting him, because I feel like every time Shipley runs the ball, he gets like a hard-earned 6 or 7 yards. Like they need to limit that to like 3 or 4. You know what I mean?
When you have an opportunity to tackle him.
Get him to
I went and watched last year's game again too yesterday. It's funny that game. Yeah, that game really did come down to that middle portion. But there are a couple instances where Shipley does something where there was a opportunity for him to do very little to nothing on the play, and FSU just didn't get the job done. So, you feel like you have a more talented defense at FSU this year. You would hope they would be a better tackling defense than they necessarily have been through the first 3 games. That's the key against Will Shipley. You can't allow 5-yard plays to turn into 25-yard plays and so on and so forth.
They do a lot of inside. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
I was just going to say, from a defensive scheme standpoint, I know nothing about what Florida State's going to do, but to me, I don't respect Clemson's receivers. Like I don't think they're all that good. I think Antonio Williams is a high-level guy, but they have not proven to me, even against FAU, I watched some of that game. They were playing on a lot of short fields because they had some nice punt returns, some turnovers, and things like that. To me, I don't see why you need to sit in a too high shell. And I know that's a lot of what they run their defense through, but bring more guys in the box and stop Shipley, because he's how this offense functions this year, in my opinion.
The thing about Shipley and the way that they're going to try to run the football, or at least what they've had through 3 games, is a lot of inside zone stuff, and that builds on some of the RPO and play action concepts that was it Garrett Riley wants to utilize. So that puts okay, so you have to control the line of scrimmage. Obviously, that's first and foremost always, right? That's a big part of it. But I think FSU's defense, as much as we thought they weren't great last week against BC, in traditional running back runs, they only allowed 0.8 yards before contact. That's actually really good. There was examples of guys getting blown off the ball and stuff, but in general, that's a strength for the defense. Really, what worries me is that second level defense, linebackers and then safeties. Shaheem Brown and Kevin Knowles are 2 of the worst tackling safeties per Pro Football Focus in the ACC, both among the bottom 10. So that's where Shipley does a lot of his damage. Yes, those harder yards you mentioned, Zach, those are there for him, but he does a lot of because he's so quick and shifty, a lot of bouncing outside. And Mike Gravel talked about that too when asked about him this week, some of his strengths, what makes him so good. And it's you think you have him bottled up for 3 or 4 yards, and then he bounces outside. So being gap discipline, trusting your eyes. Again, that's the linebacker is going to be really important. And then when you get a clean shot at him, bring him down. Shaheem Brown, Kevin Knowles, Akeem Dan, whoever's at safety, Ashlyn Barker, whoever it is, you have to make it count when you get to him and you rally to him. Because he is so explosive, it can make you miss. That to me is the concerning part of the part that I'm watching. Can you slow him down?
Early in the week, I believe both Adam Fuller and Mike Norvell went out of their way to mention that Cade Klubnik, God, I'm struggling with names this morning, is a more impressive runner than the stats would say. And I think that's a fair assertion. He's a good athlete. He can also throw well on the move. Obviously, FSU got eaten alive a week ago when a certain somebody did that I'm no longer allowed to mention, according to Brendan Sinone. So do we think Clemson tries to get FSU basically slide in one side of the field or the other with a little motion with their quarterback, or does Clemson kind of stick to who and what they are, which isn't that?
Well, Klubnik, he watching him, he is a good athlete. He's not like Castellanos or Jaden Daniels when they those guys have more shiftiness to them. Klubnik is more of there's a window, there's a lane, and he takes it.
Great
and he
line
can hurt
speed.
you that way.
Yeah,
it's long speed. So I think that's to more with him that he can burn you, but absolutely that's built in, that's baked into their offense. He can do that. I think what's really interesting, with him and how do you slow that guy down? Because there's a lot of talent. He's a former blue chip quarterback. but he's also inexperienced. And I think you see some of that, like, well, especially watching the Duke game. These last, like Mike Norvell talked about the last 6 quarters that Clemson's figured out. Seems like it's also been against FAU, which is probably below average G5 team.
Yeah.
And then who was it, the Citadel or Charleston Southern?
No, Charleston Southern.
Who had a pick 6 against Clemson, by the way.
Klubnik, to me, I'm going to pull up some numbers, but like watching him, it's like, it's funny. You see like, okay, I think he's seen some ghost here and there. Like he just looks a little skittish. Then you watch him against lesser teams later on in the season. The season's only been 3 games. And you see a little bit of a quicker trigger and him being more decisive. So it's funny to like, that's what I'm watching. And you go and try to back it up with stats. He's getting rid of the ball those last 2 weeks, about a tenth of a second and change faster. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it's actually fairly significant over like a span of a game. Like you're talking about him, like on that average, like getting rid of it a little bit quicker. I think that's what they want him to do. That's what they're trying to get him to do to run the offense with some of the RPO, like some of the pull stuff that they're doing at a higher rate. They want him to think a little bit less too, because you see that when he gets under pressure, he does start spinning a little bit. And every quarterback is not going to be as efficient under pressure as they are when they have a clean pocket. But like his drop off is like pretty drastic. I thought I saw that against Duke too. Like when he has a clean pocket, like, yeah, he's got a big arm. He can get the ball pretty much anywhere out downfield. Then you throw in like the mobility, the ability to throw on the run, like it's all there. His passer rating with the clean pocket this season, 174.1. That's 30th nationally. So very respectable for a young guy. When he's pressured, however, that passer rating plummets to 67.1, which is 93rd nationally. So you're talking about the difference between above average quarterback to pretty well below average quarterback when pressured. Question is, can Florida State get pressure?
Yeah. So you're saying he panics basically?
I saw that, and the stats reflect that. Yeah, he's not quite. I don't think he has a great wide receiving group, as Zach alluded to. So I think there's not I can just throw up the ball, you're going to go get it type of dynamic. It has to be a lot of short stuff for him. It has to be quick releases. If not, there is some panic that we've seen early on in his career. Not crazy. He's young. But,
on the receivers, they've had 3 different leading receivers through 3 different games. Bo Collins averaging about 15 per reception, but some of that's fluffed up by, I think, about a 70-yarder. I want to say against Charleston Southern, catch and run for a touchdown. Most of their longer plays from a passing game standpoint are yards after catch aided plays, not necessarily yards through air kind of play. So again, a lot of stuff thrown quickly out to the flats, shorter routes. Yeah. But if you miss a tackle, they're going to stretch your defense. They're going to make you play sideline to sideline defensively in the passing game. And if you're one-on-one and you miss the tackle, a 4-yard completion can very quickly become a lengthy completion. So I think that's where Clemson likes to put a strain on defenses. They force you to play to the middle with Shipley and Moffa to a lesser degree because he's very much a between the tackles type of guy. And then they'll stretch you to the sidelines with what they can do with some of their receivers in the passing attack and how they go about calling the plays that they're going to run.
Klubnik, by the way, to the point of not pushing the ball downfield, is 88th nationally in throws of 20-plus yards through the air. So, again, below average. That's a thing right now.
Let's move on to the defensive unit for Clemson. I think we all agree this is probably the unanimous better unit of the 2 on that squad. Chris, who are some guys that we should keep an eye on?
Really, they're good at all 3 levels. They went through some of the growing pains of last year to be a better defense this year. I think it's the best way I could put it. And that's especially true in the back half, the defensive back group. On the line, Xavier Thomas is entering his 18th year of college. Justin Maskell, also equally as much of a veteran. Those are your 2 DNs for them. Tyler Davis, plenty familiar to FSU folks. He chose them over us. Peter Woods, younger guy out of Alabama. That was a big win for them over the University of Alabama. He's more a reserve D tackle, but he plays not quite starter level reps, but they use him a good bit. And then Rook is also there, who was there last year on the interior. That linebacker group, I think it's one of the better ones in the nation. Barrett Carter is an excellent football player, as is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And then Wade Woodhouse, who's the older brother of Drew, who FSU recruited a little bit, both of them out of the Tampa area. They're the 3 guys in that group, and they can just get it done. And then that secondary, as I mentioned last year, a lot of those guys played, a lot of familiar names. Jalen Phillips at safety. He's a graduate. He's played a good bit for them this year and played at a pretty high level. Nate Wiggins, Sheridan Jones, RJ Mickens, Andrew Mukuba, who's another one familiar from recruiting. And then they've had a couple younger pieces start emerging in that group. Khalil Barnes, who's a freshman nickel that they've used. He plays kind of similar to what Andrew does for them in that secondary, and Sherrod Koval Jr., who I believe is a sophomore. He's a reserve safety. He's kind of split duty some with RJ Mickens. So they got a pretty nice deep group in that whole bunch. They haven't actually. It's kind of weird statistically, and statistics don't tell you everything about what they do defensively. They've not killed in the sack category. Now, tackles for loss, they're doing what they always do. Clemson, I think over the last 10 years, might lead college football in tackles for loss. If they don't lead, they're second to Bama. They've always been that high-level category there. That's still true. That's like a staple of their defense. They are going to generate a lot of negative plays, but they're not racking up sacks so far this year. I think they have 4 through 3 games as a defense. And I think some of it is they're just kind of playing people straight up. They're not overly aggressive with pressure, right, from what I understand. And from watching a little bit of what they've done against opponents, it's more so if they win a one-on-one battle, they'll pressure you, but they're not going to bring extra bodies. So they're going to leave a whole lot of bodies in that back half if you're trying to pass against them. And then in the run game, their linebackers are very talented, smart players who do a good job with run fits. So they're not going to allow a lot of busted plays. So in general, sound group, a lot of experience in that group, a lot of guys who have played a lot of snaps in the Clemson defense in that group, and it kind of shows.
I have some concerns about being able to win in the trenches against this Clemson team. They've been pretty solid there, and Chris mentioned their linebackers. Like, they have a really top-notch group of linebackers. So, like, that's a group that could give you a lot of issues, and the secondary is a lot better than last year too. I did notice watching them against Duke a few times, like, their linebackers get a ton of depth. I saw like one play where a guy dropped back like 9 to 10 yards, a couple yards more than the normal. So like and Duke hit a tight end kind of slipping underneath. So there is something there to where, like, I think you can maybe, if they're going to try to play, soft against Jordan Travis, it's big for Jordan to take underneath checkdowns. That's something I know the fan bases want to see. Yes, you're going to have to hit your explosives. Clemson's one of the best teams in the country and not allowing explosives. Like, when you have those opportunities, you're going to have to hit them, but you're going to have to take what the defense gives you to, because this is an upper tier. I don't know if it's an elite defense, Chris, but it's a very good one.
On the explosives point, they've allowed 8 on the year. 5 of those came against Duke. Part of the reason Duke was able to do that was the legs of Riley Leonard, whether it was running or throwing. He opened things up. I think more than we've seen Jordan Travis do through 3 games, run the ball. He's got to decide to go north-south, get going, run some. I think it will open some things up, some opportunities. I think it makes their linebackers play a little bit different when quarterbacks start doing that. But yeah, they don't give up a whole lot of explosives.
It's funny, like, they don't, and like, their defensive. So Kev, like, this is in the passing game. Kev pulled this up the other day, and again, it's like they haven't played a great slate so far, so there's a lot of noise in these numbers. But like, their defensive expected points added per play, basically, when it's 1 to 10 yards downfield, is 0.1, which is first nationally. They're as good as anyone. And then over 20 yards, it's 0.02, which is 21st nationally. So they're nothing really short that they give up a ton, and nothing really deep. But a little bit of noise of those numbers as you look how Duke attacked them, that 1 to 10 yard became a negative for them, whereas 0.7 yards per play EPA. So that was 73rd nationally. So Duke was able to do some things creatively underneath, some like running back delays, some tight end delays, a lot of stuff where they had Clemson allow them to kind of either be super aggressive up front and find gaps there, or the opposite, if Clemson was conservative and got too deep on some of its zone drops, you're able to hit it underneath as well. So it's a defense that can get got. Like, you can move the ball against them. I know we've talked about like that Duke game that Clemson gave up a ton in the red zone of like what they could have, field goals and turnovers where they had some missed opportunities, but Duke did as well. So you can move the ball on them. This isn't past years where I feel like it's this juggernaut of a defense. It is a very good one. Maybe by the end of the year they can push to be elite, but like right now I'm not seeing like an elite defense. I'm seeing a good one with a lot of good athletes, especially at that second level, and some of their interior defensive linemen.
They've allowed just 6 red zone visits to opponents this year. Some of that's a little interesting with numbers because Duke also hit some big plays where they scored from outside the red zone. In those 6 red zone visits, 3 rushing touchdowns, 1 field goal allowed, 2 stops. So 2 out of 3 times opponents have scored against them in the red zone. Pretty good rate from a defensive standpoint for Clemson stopping.
This is our Know Thy Enemy, Zach. How do we do?
Great. You want to move to some buy or Sonone?
Yeah,
Brought to you by the Turner Group.
The Turner Group. Do you guys have like neighbors that you don't like? Or do you have a cell phone dead spot in your house like Zach does?
Yes.
Colin Turner, the Turner Group can help you. He can't fix that you have a crappy reception in your house, which annoys the hell out of me, Zach. But he could help you find a new house. The Turner Group with Colin and Amy Turner do an amazing job with having connections throughout the state of Florida. They are skilled veterans of the buying and selling process. The market is ever changing. You need to have someone that you trust in that process. So if you're considering entering the home buying market, like you want to know what it looks like, you're thinking about selling, you want to know what that process looks like right now in the state of Florida, reach out to Colin Turner of the Turner Group. If you want me to make an introduction for you guys, please send me a DM either over X, Twitter, or on Noles247.com, and I can hook you guys up. And just but he's already had someone reach out, and it was a conversation. He's not going to be a high pressure outfit or anything like that. So Colin is really good dude, and very, very, very well respected at what he does. So let's play some buy or Sonone. Do you want me to take over and ask him, Zach?
Sure.
Or do you want to do buy or Sonone?
I'll do it.
Okay. All right.
Buy or Sonone. FSU doesn't have the recruiting momentum that it should on the trail. Okay, you wrote this really weird. As it should on the trail after a 3-0 start.
Nailed it.
I'll also known that. I'll go ahead and start. Also known that I don't think FSU pushes for recruiting momentum in season quite as much as maybe people want them to. I just think it's the way they go about doing their business. Plenty of kids are interested in FSU. FSU's done a good job. Now, there are positions they could be recruiting better. Maybe you would hope maybe get a bump because of your success on the field and the ranking in front of your name. Sure, I'd agree with that. But overall, I sell that.
Sonone. I will buy it. And I'm not, it's not like a caveat, like I'm not like super concerned about it right now, but I feel like they didn't get a ton of juice after the LSU game, which feels so long ago at this point, compared to like Miami after the A&M game. FSU beat a better team in a more marquee time zone, like they're only team in the country. And I feel like Miami got a lot more juice out of it. And those are two coaching staffs that go about it different ways. Like Miami's recruit. Florida State's more long-term relationships and finding some moments to kick. So it could be some of it, but even like Florida this past weekend, I feel like got more buzz than what Florida State did after a big win. So to be fair, like FSU is pushing its chips in for late official visits, both in season and then obviously in December. So like we might feel that momentum a little bit more later on in the year, but like right now it doesn't feel like it has the buzz. I would hope it would, given that this is like a top 5 team nationally. It doesn't feel that way. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, I'll buy, but I don't think it's like what you said, Brennan. I don't think it's like a huge deal. But I would just note, like I think Miami and Florida definitely got more buzz off of their wins, and I don't think they were as marquee as FSU's.
How? Like how? Right?
I guess
that's how they go about their business.
Well, the one difference is they were both home games. FSU didn't have a home game. Their coaches couldn't talk to any of the recruits that were in Orlando for that game. So that could be part of it. And FSU did get some buzz. Like,
yeah,
I have a ton of stuff that I can't even report on yet. Like, as far as like prospects committed elsewhere that are showing a lot of interest in Florida State. And I know everyone on the Noles 24/7 message board is obsessed with one prospect that I brought up a few weeks ago that could potentially visit FSU down the line. My mistake.
Hey, you brought it up.
My mistake. But there are a number of prospects committed elsewhere that I'm communicating with, and they're letting me know that, a visit to Florida State is on the table, which wasn't the case before the LSU game. So I definitely think that FSU is making some momentum behind the scenes with a number of prospects, and I would keep an eye on the 3 weekends in October, the 3 home games, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and
Duke,
as some pretty marquee weekends before the huge weekend, which is going to be Miami. That's going to be the biggest weekend of in season visits for Florida State throughout the entire year, and definitely keep an eye on names that show up for that one. But another thing is like Florida State's not doing a lot of in-season official visits with 2024 prospects. The only scheduled OV right now that I've been told is LJ McCray for Virginia Tech, the 4-star defensive lineman out of Mainland. high school. He's the only OV they have on the docket right now. The rest of the guys, they're kind of in wait and see mode, probably trying to do them after the season. I don't think they're a huge fan of doing in-season OVs. LJ McRae is obviously a unique scenario because he wants to make a decision in October, and they have not used their official visit with him yet.
Okay, makes sense. Chris, but real quick, Buyer Sonone, a home stretch in October where we're not traveling.
I'm here for it. I'm buying that wholeheartedly.
We're getting old, man. These road trips stick with you a little different.
Buyer Sonone, the Heisman hype is getting to Jordan Travis.
I will adamantly Sonone that. Jordan hasn't played up to, I think, the standard that he would like to play to. He hasn't played up to the standard that I think we, as people cover Florida State and enjoy watching Florida State as fans, like as the fan base would like. But I don't think it's because he's trying to get Heisman Trophy numbers. I think if there's any level of pressure that he's feeling, I think it's not internal as much as it is like understand that there's pressure of expectations, I should say, for the team to do very well. And so I think he's keenly aware of that and knows how much kind of hinges on him. I think, and he said this wasn't a big deal when we talked to him the other day. Yet my interpretation is I do think he is still trying to figure out the balancing act of keeping his targets happy, his wide receivers happy, the amount of high-end talent they have at skill positions, trying to keep everyone involved throughout the course of the game. And I think we've seen that manifest itself in him taking some deep shots when there's been some stuff underneath. But I think he's also been directed to like take these deep shots too. I think that's also part of what they've been trying to set up the last couple of weeks. And maybe it's building on things to try to put stuff on film or whatever. I'm not sure. But I guess I inherently don't think like Jordan Travis, like, oh, I'm trying to pad my stats to be a Heisman Trophy. Like, I think that narrative doesn't jibe with who Jordan Travis is and what we've known of the young man for the last several years. So I will Sonone that it's Heisman hype that's maybe getting into play a little less loose than what we've seen in the past. Chris, what about you?
I'm Sononing it. I haven't had a single soul in the building mention that to me. And truthfully, I can't think of a single time Jordan's ever actually brought up the Heisman on his own. So Jordan Travis likes to win football games. Like, we've dealt with the kid long enough to fully understand who and what he is and what he's made of and how he ticks. He just wants to win. And he wants to play well when they win. But, like, at the end of the day, he just wants that team to win. So, also known it.
Also known as well. I don't think that's having an impact on his performance. I definitely think, I mean, he says it consistently, like he could have 0 yards, 0 touchdowns as long as the team's winning, like he's good with it. And I do think, like, obviously, like any player wants to have accolades, right? But that's not his primary focus. He wants to win football games. ESPN ran an awesome story on him earlier in the week, talking about kind of his journey from almost quitting. This has been talked about at length, but they had some really good quotes and stuff.
We wrote about that too, guys. I love David and Andrea.
Okay, you're awesome.
We've written about it for
but there was some really good stuff like in there after the 2021 UF game. He texted the team saying, we're gonna lock in and make sure that we never feel this way again. And I think that kind of shows like his true priorities are for this team to win as many games as possible. And I don't think the Heisman hype is really getting to him. I think more so like the pressure of holding up to the preseason expectations maybe is what I would guess. But I don't know.
Real quick, Clemson was the last loss they had last season, right? That was the third in a 3-game stretch. Afterwards, afterwards he had said he's kind of sick and tired of that feeling, right? It was Wake, NC State, sandwich in there, and Clemson. Afterwards, he said he was sick of that feeling, tired of losing. And they haven't lost since. He kind of went and put his name on it and said, like, this isn't acceptable. Like, there's no need. It's about us. Like, if we do our stuff, handle our business, it will be fine. And
I think
he's led them very well since then.
I think this topic has come up because the offense lacks an identity to this point in time. Or maybe the identity is that it's been a shot-based offense that's had a mixed amount of results.
They haven't hit shots that they normally like.
Right.
He's had a lower hit rate on shots than he did last year, which was really high, and even the year before when he was average at it. Like,
But if FSU's running the ball at a slightly better tick with more rhythm to it, if they're hitting shots at a slightly better number, which they have a standard of doing so with the current personnel, plus Keon Coleman, plus Shaheem Bell, I don't think this topic exists. I think it's the best way I can put it. I think this is a product of the offense feeling a little discombobulated, as I think Zach said for last weekend's game. I don't think it's Jordan Travis trying to win a trophy. The only trophy I think Jordan Travis cares about are bigger ones that are team-oriented, personally. Like, if a Heisman came along because FSU made it there, he'd love it. He'd probably give a phenomenal speech in New York. I don't think he cares about that right now, personally.
Buy or Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
Cryptic tweets with 3 football emojis.
Sonone in that. I don't love that. We've been told that the Keon Coleman stuff wasn't about the 3 receiving targets that he had, but I just let's not give fodder to anyone. Like, when I thought this team was past that kind of stuff. And
I'm buying cryptic tweets. I love it. It gives it's
bills paid.
Great clickbait generator, even though we didn't clickbait generate it. But I know sometimes people love to say we just do clickbait, even though we didn't clickbait generate that.
You probably
stop overanalyzing this, Chris.
Oh, I'm sorry. Analysis.
Buy or Sonone, sponsored by
the Turner Group.
FSU misses Trayshawn Ward.
Wholeheartedly. Buy. Trayshawn Ward had better vision than anybody that's currently in that running back room. I think that's a fair statement. And FSU hasn't run the ball well, and there's been instances where vision's been an issue partly to it, but it's also been blocking at times. There's plenty of reasons why the running game has yet to find its groove. They miss Trayshawn. Trayshawn's a great running back. There's a reason he went to K-State and he's being featured, and he's doing really well from what I understand and what little bit I've seen of him this season. But, like, I don't think his role would have been any different at FSU.
You know what's funny? And buy that they're missing Trayshawn Ward. But the idea that the running game is struggling, and it's not what it needs to be. Like, I don't think anyone is going to push back on that. But I will say, like, for context, last year, the first month of the season, let's see, Florida State, like, it took it a while to get going. Last year in August, September, it was averaging 5.53 yards per carry. This year, it is averaging 5.42 yards a carry. So it's, like, not a huge difference. Trey Benson getting going in the second half of the season is what took it from a good running game to an elite one. And he hasn't gotten going yet. And like, that's going to be huge just to get him going, because that's how your offense becomes elite. And, like, I think we know what Trey's strengths are and what his weaknesses are. His weaknesses are that he's not a quick cut, natural, like, shifty in between the tackles runner. He's a builder. He's someone that when he gets outside, he can get ahead of steam. He's extremely dangerous. He's going to break tackles, as we've seen it, like, at the highest rate ever in the Pro Football Focus era the last decade or so. And he hasn't broken a lot of tackles this year. You miss Trayshawn Ward because he was that safety blanket. When things weren't going well, you could trust him to create a modest amount of yards. And that ended up making, I'm saying modest, like, he ended up leading the ACC in yards per carry the last 2 years. Or was in the top 2 or 3. Was really good. But, like, he would find those hidden yards in between the tackles and keep your offense moving. I think Rodney Hill can be some of that. I would like to see more of him. But really, why I'm buying this, guys, like, why I think this is what you're really missing from Trayshawn Ward. Chris, you saw it twice in the 2021 preseason. Who did Trayshawn Ward get in fights with twice?
I mean, in Jacksonville, him and Jermaine Johnson came to blows on a play I think Trayshawn wasn't even in on, if I recall correctly. I think Jermaine popped Jordan Travis at the end of a snap in Jacksonville, kind of gave him a shove, and if I recall, Jordan did a little bit of a barrel roll, and Trayshawn didn't like that, so he came after him. Trayshawn ran like his life depended on it, and there's a little bit of want to in that, and that room has good dudes in it and guys that play really hard and practice really hard currently, but Trayshawn's just a different cat. He's kind of cut a different way, and yeah, that combined with vision is a value that's very tough to replace. The running game to me is a weird topic. I know I asked a question to Mike Norvell on Monday about bread and butter plays, and he didn't seem to love that question, but I'm cool with that.
He did not. And it was a good answer. I liked his response to it, but he did not love the question.
No, he did not. And the running game is, I think the best way I can describe my view of the running game is it does not feel like it's the dependable thing they can go to kill the clock, to do what they need to do, that they can just hit at a high success rate. Is it capable of producing yards and being effective in games? Yes, it is. Does it feel comfortable as something you can lean on? I don't know that I feel that way currently.
But like we saw, I kind of feel that similarly, Chris. But like then in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, we did see the LSU second half.
They leaned on in the second half, yes.
Right up LSU's, what, to milk the game and kill it. Like against a good defensive front. So it exists. It's there against a really good team. I think
out of 12 quarters, how many quarters have you felt like, man, they ran the ball well, though? To me, it's like maybe 3, maybe 4.
I was going to say 4 or 5, maybe 6. I mean, Southern Miss, they ran it really well in the second half. So 4 quarters. BC, they didn't run it particularly well at all. 3.8 yards a carry. Yeah, 4, I guess.
And some of that's also the O-line's actual initial push at the line of scrimmage. It hasn't been particularly good.
It's actually, and it's like not, there's a lot of noise in these numbers too, but like they're averaging more yards per carry before contact this year than they did last year against, like, I think LSU is a top tier defensive front. I think Boston College is a solid Power 5 defensive front, and I think that Southern Miss is a good G5 one. So I don't know, but like not all yards per carry are created equal too. Like, are you getting isolated with a safety? You're getting isolated with a cornerback. Like, those are different things, I guess. But it's still being built. You're still trying to find continuity. I do think you miss Maurice Smith, and I think Darius Washington has blocked his ass off. He's been really, really good as a center, but you don't replace Maurice being the point guard of the offensive line, basically, like in just a couple games. So I think it's still building. I think they're trying to establish their identity on offense with the run game. Sorry, Zach, this has been a long and winding road to say, like, yeah, Trayshawn Ward would be helpful right now. And I think he's a badass, and he brought a little chip and a little edge to that running back room. And I think FSU missed that edge, especially against Boston College on Saturday.
Let's get one last Buyer Sonone in.
Brought to you by Turner Group.
Thank you. Buyer Sonone. Jared Verse is actually playing well despite 0 sacks.
100% a buy. You can't watch the BC game and not think Jared Verse played well. He was disruptive. In a game where FSU did not act aggressively towards quarterbacks, Jared Verse was still good at it.
People did watch the BC game and thought he didn't play well.
Which I don't get. I thought in real time he looked really good, and then in watching it again, I thought he looked pretty good. The sacks will come if he keeps playing as he is. My main concern with the D-line is that Jared Verse is demanding a lot of attention, which should free others up, especially the guy playing the opposite bookend, and it has not been a particularly strong place for FSU. Patrick Payton hasn't played well. If we want to pick on a D end, no offense, Pat, but like he can play better than he's played.
The pass rush grades per PFF, Jared has a 72.8, but I think there's a lot of noise in that one because he's getting chipped, and teams are keenly aware of where Jared Verse is. Patrick Payton's at a 63.3, just pretty pedestrian. Gilbert Edmond, your third defensive end's at a 56.8. And Braden Fisk, a guy who we had a lot of high hopes for as a pass rusher, and he's had a couple pressures and had some flashes, 62.1 PFF grade. So those are like all replacement level type of grades other than Jared, who's above average. They're playing scrambling quarterbacks in 2 out of 3 games, and then Southern Miss had a very quick trigger type of offense to where you probably weren't going to get a ton of pressure. So like Jared Verse took over that BC game for stretches, and he did it in a variety of ways. It wasn't just rushing the passer. It was stopping the run. It was hustle plays, effort plays. I'm not worried. I forget what the prompt was, Zach, but whatever the one that is encouraging for Jared Verse's performance, I think he's been very good. I think he's been what you need him to be. You need other guys, to Chris's point, to step up.
To tie that into the Clemson game, Clemson's allowed only 3 sacks this season. They've allowed 12 tackles for loss. They've played 2 different O-lines. Same group at 3 spots for all 3 games, and then they've rotated a couple of spots. Yeah, but all in all, their O-line's pretty well experienced.
They have an experienced offensive line. I don't feel like they get rid of the ball so quickly. I don't think you're gonna get a ton of sacks unless you can get ahead and put them in a lot of like passing down stuff. Their pressure rate of 31% allowed is 73rd nationally, and given that they've played Duke has some good defensive linemen, but they've played a pretty light schedule so far. That's not great. So, but FSU's pressure rate on defense, I got this pulled up. FSU's pressure rate on defense is 27.9%. That's 105th nationally. Like that's not acceptable. That has to be better for you to be where you want to be. Like you can't be in the hundreds with Jared Verse out there. Like there needs to be more production.
Agreed.
Aggressiveness. You would like to see more aggressiveness? Because I'd like to see more aggressiveness.
Energy. I just need to see my guys. I just need to see the defensive line whoop the ass of the offensive line across for it. And that's totally in their arsenal. It's there. If they want to blitz and get after the quarterback, great. I don't think you have to. I think you win with 4 consistently with this group, but the group has to do it now. Like,
quit playing peekaboo and looking around guys and actually
I would like to see
through them and get around.
Let's let Braden Fisk just go get someone.
Yeah. See ball, get ball.
All right, guys, it's time to make some predictions. But first, predictions are brought to you by The Battle's End, Florida State's leading collective. If you like being a road favorite at Clemson, support The Battle's End. Fellas, I guess I'll go with Brendan first. What's your prediction for this game?
I really haven't thought much about it, to be totally honest. I know I wrote it down in the script for us to do, but that was the first I've thought about it, and I've been talking for the last hour since then. I don't know, guys. I really don't feel great going up there. I think FSU is a more talented team. It's interesting. I think your strengths kind of match up with some of their weaknesses, and then vice versa. If this is the second half team against LSU, they're going to come out and whoop ass and win by a couple scores. But I could also see them coming out flat, because I think that they've shown that they can do that as well in that environment, and maybe lose by a score or 10 points or something like that. I will go with, I'm going to do an emotional hedge here, because it's going to be a long car ride up and it's going to be a long car ride back, and I need the emotional hedge for this. I think Clemson is going to pull it together and win 31-28. I have FSU losing. And this is the only game I thought FSU would lose going into the year from a win percentage standpoint. I will stand by that. Clemson's not as good as I thought. FSU's a little bit better, but I'm still shook from this past week. So I don't feel great about that.
I have FSU winning 31-29. I'm taking the over in points, but I'm taking Clemson with the 2.5 there.
He's taking the BC score.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it again. Yeah. I think FSU's offense is wholeheartedly capable of doing some damage to Clemson. My concern from an FSU standpoint is basically Will Shipley creating leverage situations that cause FSU's defense to get discombobulated. And we have some repeats of what we've seen at bad times this year. So that's what has me concerned. I do think it's very much largely a coin flip football game. And I thought that going into the year, and I still kind of feel that way. But I do think FSU's better of the two offenses. I think Clemson's probably slightly, or at least definitely playing better of the two defenses so far. But, yeah, I think it's a coin flip type game. FSU 31-29. Yeah.
Chris and I are kind of inverted, but I think we're thinking similarly, just a field goal difference the other way. What would surprise you, Chris? What outcome would legitimately? Because not a lot would surprise
Clemson
me.
blowing FSU out would surprise me. FSU blowing Clemson out would not surprise me. FSU, if they play like they did the second half of LSU, can beat the ever-loving crap out of Clemson. But I don't know what version of FSU we will get, and if we'll get it for a quarter, if we'll get it for a half, if we'll get it for 4 quarters. I don't know what to expect in that regard. And I don't know if FSU knows what to expect. At some point, FSU, I think, is going to evolve into their best selves. I don't know when that evolution comes for them.
What about you, Zach?
I think it comes this weekend. I have them winning 35-31. So they'll cover the spread.
And over.
Yeah. And
well
I think,
over.
I think we see these offenses shine more than the defenses. I'm not super high on what FSU's done so far on defense, aside from a few quarters. And then, I think Clemson's defense hasn't really been tested by elite talent yet. And I think they will this weekend. So, yeah, I have a high scoring affair, but I think Florida State comes out on top.
I'm interested from a clock perspective how this game plays. Because I think Clemson, at their strength of their offense, is a run team with Shipley and Maffa. And right. FSU, I think, tries to run at Clemson. We saw them have success with that in the second half of the Clemson game last year. I think there's an effort maybe by FSU to do that. So I'm just interested in how much the two teams, by going about their business like that, shorten the game. Clemson's also a high first down offense team in the sense of producing a lot of first downs. A lot of that's because they don't exactly make a lot of vertical throws. Yeah, I think their throws over 20, they have, 10 through 3 games, I think is what it is. And then obviously 10 and under, they have 46. So yeah, compare those numbers, kind of look at it. I think it's one of those games where the clock might keep moving. I'm interested if it kind of gets shortened up. Feels more like an NFL game from a possession standpoint than necessarily a college game.
FSU is like their success rate on early downs on defense isn't great. I think FSU's at, I'm pulling it up. It's the CFB graphs. I think it's their EPA. No, sorry, it's just their success rate. They're 93rd nationally on first and second down with success rate on defense, whereas Clemson's offense is 12th nationally with 76.3%. Some of that FSU allows, like with the 2 eye looks, a lot of the time will allow some of that early on to play for third downs.
Yeah, FSU had actually really been good on third down till last week. Last week killed those numbers for them.
Yeah, I think they've allowed the most yards on third down of any Power 5 team in the country. But again, that's not typical. That it hasn't always been a strength, but it hasn't been that glaring of a weakness either. So we'll see. But will the real Florida State please stand up? I think we're kind of entering that territory this week.
Awesome.
Good job, Zach. That was a nice 3-second delay with you to say awesome with the mic half off. Great job. Nailed it.
You're so nice. I can't wait
until
the bye week comes and you can start being less on edge.
I'm just glad I got back on the reels. I was struggling there.
You were wild, man. The whole Draper family and everything.
Uncle Draper.
Mazel tov.
For Zach Blostein, Brendan Sinone, and Chris Nee, this was On the Bench. Thanks for listening. Give us some 5-star reviews. We'll see you next week.